I am flying today from a very unusual place, a mysterious Côn Đảo Island in Vietnam. This tiny island of just 50 square kilometers was called both Hell on Earth and Heaven on Earth in different times. During French colonial time, the island was used as one of the most notorious prisons, but these days it's famous for its clean, secluded beaches, lush forests and rare wildlife. With only 10,000 of population and literally just few hotels, it's quiet and uncrowded and got a reputation of a hidden luxury escape, attracting rich and powerful of this world. My today's flight is as exotic and adventurous as the island itself. It's a 230-kilometer hop on a turboprop, and I will be flying VASCO, or Vietnam Air Service Company, a small subsidiary of Vietnam Airlines, which is operating flights to small and remote destinations where larger planes can't fly. Côn Đảo to Ho Chi Minh City is one of their signature flights. Côn Đảo Airport looks like a postcard tropical island airport. Surrounded by mountains, jungle and the sea, it has a very short runway that can only handle smaller turboprops and which literally goes all the way into the sea. It has only basic navigation equipment and no lighting, so it depends on visual approach, and flights are operated only during the daytime. A local discounter, Vietjet, operates a small Chinese jet on this route, Comac C909, which seems to be pushing the envelope. The runway is barely enough for the plane requirements, and the fact that they allow only 8 kg of luggage is a bit spooky. I would rather stick to the old good French ATR turboprops. Côn Đảo Airport is surprisingly bigger and better than one might expect. While there is nothing impressive inside, the air conditioning works very well, and one could argue that this airport is better and cleaner than many typical European airports at holiday destinations. The one and only challenge is that there is absolutely nothing to do there, so my advice, don't come too early. The gate is literally 50 meters away from the check-in desk. It's not the airport where you can get lost. There is a surprise there, however. As basic as it looks, the airport got a face recognition system at the boarding gates. Wow! Which works, however, only for Vietnamese as it's somehow connected to local electronic ID. The airport waiting area is simple and straightforward. It's not the main tourist season in Vietnam now, so there are only few tourists, the rest being locals. The plane is more or less the only way to get to the mainland. There is also a ferry, but it takes massive 10-12 hours and heavily dependent on the weather. There are a dozen shops scattered around the terminal building, selling all kinds of typical souvenirs and Vietnamese snacks and sweets, but they don't seem to impress locals too much, as for sure they know where to buy all the same, but several times cheaper. The main attraction for me is the runway. It's very close and you get the sound and almost feel vibration coming from those turboprops taxiing no more than 50 meters away from you. VASCO operates 11 to 12 flights a day between Ho Chi Minh City and Côn Đảo, and a couple of flights to Can Tho, a large regional city in Mekong Delta. So as you wait for your flight, there is a good chance to see at least one or two of those turboprops whizzing in and out of the airport. Trying out a new airline is always an experience, and VASCO is a really rare gem. It's a very small airline with only 6 planes that serves 10 small domestic destinations in Vietnam from Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi. You will not find it in any other airports, even in Southeast Asia. You need to be in Vietnam and you need to be flying to a small remote airport. VASCO runs all ATR fleet, which is actually much younger than one may expect, around 15-16 years on average, as they operate a newer ATR 72-500 version. I was curious about trying business, but turned out they don't have it. There is premium economy, which I'm still curious about. It's not Heathrow or Frankfurt, so in 15 minutes I explored more or less everything and heading to the boarding gate. The boarding is by bus, which is clearly a critically important element. The plane is whole 50 meters away from the terminal, so bus is definitely a must-have. There is actually several of them, apparently to handle the intense traffic and the long drive to the plane. Getting on that bus, waiting and driving takes 10 times more time than that would take to walk to that plane. I definitely can give few hints to Côn Đảo airport bosses how to cut costs. Our strange drive goes around the plane and I get an almost 360 experience of our ATR turboprop. Maybe this bus makes sense after all. Not as a transport, but rather as an air geek entertainment. VASCO livery looks very retro, which interestingly seems like a good match to this flight and the destination. Though not sure this was an objective from the airline from the very beginning. ATRs are boarded through the rear door, front door is actually a cargo hold. Today's plane with the tail number VNB221 is a rather fresh 16 years old ATR. However, it looks a bit above its age. It's a bit like it was smoking and drinking heavily in the youth and the face looks older now. The paint on the body seems to be like a patchwork. Hope it's not repainted dance but something else. I have seen this on Air India Dreamliner wings and it was spooky, though apparently it's a common issue of paint peeling on those carbon fiber wings. But this ATR is as metal as it gets, so I try not to think about all that possible unhealthy lifestyle it had that brought it to this condition. Inside, everything is very tight and very simple. We have 2 seat configuration and it looks and feels like we stepped back 50 years. Feels very retro. Forget about those new slimline ergonomic seats. These are old school bulky seats with thick cushions and a rough artificial leather. The seats are packed very tight. It's about 29 to 30 inch seat pitch, which feels somehow even more tight than Ryanair. There is a recline, but it's so small that it doesn't really change anything. But as I said before, all this actually strangely matches the destination, so rather than outdated, it feels exotic. I'm all alone in the luxury of my so-called business or premium economy, which is just 4 last rows of seats. Since the door is at the back, then premium part of the cabin is reverse versus usual, though premium is a very relative thing here. Everyone settles in their seats very quickly, there are only few passengers on board and there is no fight at all for the overhead bins, as VASCO gives a very luxurious 20 kg luggage allowance for basic economy fares. There is also probably much less flight preparation for pilots and crews than on larger jets. Everything is done within 5 minutes and our ATR is now racing through the airport with a speed that feels like several times faster than regular jet taxiing. The whole taxiing is just going to the end of the runway, turn around and immediately start running for the takeoff. In 20 seconds we are already in the air, leaving behind the mountains covered with jungles and the pristine beaches with emerald water. Generally, turboprops, especially smaller ones, could be quite bumpy in the air, especially during takeoff and landings, but we are lucky today, as well as our pilot seems to be maneuvering very well between the clouds, so the ride is very smooth. My premium cabin entitles me to a service, or some service. In my case, this is a kind of muffin and a glass of water. The muffin is in VASCO branded packaging, which makes me wondering how old it is. They probably don't need more than couple dozens of those a day, so if someone produces for VASCO a batch of couple of thousands, it may take weeks for them to be consumed. But I have something else coming. Booking through Vietnam Airlines, I noticed an option to pre-book Vietnam Airlines special milk tea for just €1, and for sure I went for it. That turned out to be a great idea. It's a perfect cup of milk tea, but the amount of plastic they used to wrap this cup of tea could make Greta Thunberg get a heart attack. This is still a very unfortunate thing in many countries in Southeast Asia. Everything is using tons of plastic. The plane is not full, so I have all the opportunity to step out of the luxury comfort zone of my premium cabin and go up front to visit common folks there, who don't even suspect about the greatness of the last 4 rows of the seats. The cool thing here up front is that you could see those large propellers chopping the air right next to you. I'm trying to get myself entertained further and come across an in-flight magazine. VASCO expectedly doesn't have their own, but rather use one from Vietnam Airlines. It's actually very nice and very interesting to read. Contrary to many others, it doesn't have half of the pages given to advertising, but actually is a proper travel magazine focusing a lot on Vietnam tourism and exploring different destinations in the country. We are at the cruising altitude for no more than 15 minutes and starting the descent. At the end, it's just a 200 kilometers flight. We are overflying the Mekong Delta, where this great Asian river empties into South China Sea. You can see how brownish Mekong water colludes with blue sea, and the two colors are mixed for kilometers deep into the sea. While some are surprised by the color of Mekong, it's not a sign of pollution but rather of sediment carried by the water, especially during rainy season as the clay and sand washed from the river banks into the river. Another 10 minutes and we're getting close to Chi Minh City, which many may still know under its older name Saigon. It's one of the most bustling megapolises of Southeast Asia, with 10 million population and massive size of the city. Despite of all the new high-rises, the city is still predominantly built with traditional narrow 2-3-story houses, tightly sitting on the streets next to each other. It's an amazing city, and even from bird's view of the plane, it stretches all the way to the horizon, giving a good idea of its massive size. The Saigon River, which gave its name to the city originally, is widening through the city, making multiple loops and creating almost like islands within the city. We are closer and closer to the land and the picture becomes wavy, almost like a heat haze over the hot road. This is a cool effect that you can only get on a turboprop when landing. The propellers work harder during the landing, activated flaps cause further air disturbances, and all this creates air turbulence which give birth to this cool cinematic effect. Ho Chi Minh Tan Son Nhat Airport is right in the middle of the city, and it's almost like landing in New York Central Park. Suddenly you descend and land in an island of greenery in an endless sea of small tight houses. There is also a massive golf course right next to this airport. Surprisingly, it's owned by Vietnam Army. There were many discussions that airport needs land for expansion and the golf course needs to move, but at the end golf course stands strong and the new airport is being built 50 kilometers outside of the city. We got lucky again and the landing was as smooth as the takeoff, though it's a rainy season in Vietnam and there were suspiciously looking clouds here and there. We are taxiing to the new Terminal 3, which is supposed to unload a massively congested Tan Son Nhat Airport. The new terminal handles all domestic travel for Vietnam Airlines, hosting also VASCO as its subsidiary. It's almost magical that in less than an hour this retro-looking flight transfers you from an ideally of small remote tropical island to craziness of one of the largest cities in Southeast Asia, where our small turboprop is immediately dwarfed by all the wide bodies taxiing around, making it look and feel even more that we came from some another world. As the flight is over, I'm very happy with this rustic VASCO flight on ATR turboprop. This would not be what one may call a luxury experience, but it's definitely a very cool and a very unique experience with lots of retro feeling to it, even though the plane was not that old. Definitely happy that I took this flight and I would highly recommend it for any aviation enthusiast eager to try new and exotic airlines and destinations.